So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy and I feel so honored to be with you for this very, very important milestone in your lives. Actually, I never thought that one day I would be speaking to such an audience. Let me explain you why. My father, as Eloïc said, Sophie Bellon, is the founder of Sodexo, and he studied in HEC. It took him 4 years to be admitted. I can tell you, he was a very determined man. When I decided to go to a business school too, he was convinced that it had to be HEC. So, after 2 years of preparing for entry the school, I was so stressed that my face was covered with little pimples of acne. So I went to my father and I told him, "Have you seen my face?" And I finished whatever school accepts me this year will be the one I will go to. Well, it was not HEC, but in the end, I still had a great time in my business school and learned a lot. But anyway, congratulations to all those of you in this room who are graduating today from HEC. I think you need another round of applause. I know you're taking a lot away from this year. It has been intense. You have put in lots of time and efforts. You have learned, you have experienced something different, you've met people from across the world. Why did you do all this in the first place? Well, I'm sure you all have your own personal answers to this question. But I'm also sure that you have one thing in common. Fundamentally, you came because you wanted to progress. And this is what I want to talk to you about today, progress. Because I believe in spirit of progress, and I believe that progress today is very underrated. At Sodexo, one of our 3 company values is progress. And I will start with a personal story. Back in 2008, as Eloïc said, I got a new role, and I had been working for Sodexo for 10 years, mostly in finance and strategy. And I was taking an operational responsibilities. I became CEO of a 500 million euro business unit in France, and on my first day, I attended a meeting with the 18 members of my future leadership team. And when I got in the room, my heart began to race. I felt hot, maybe a little like today, but it was winter. My body was telling me, "What are you doing here? Get out." Well, I stayed. I attended the meeting. I asked questions on the business, of course, but also, why am I the only woman in the room? I was told that these roles were not for women because they involved a lot of travel. Well, just so you have the context in mind, I was coming from a role where I was constantly commuting between France and the US. So 5 years later, when I moved onto a new responsibility, there were 5 women in my leadership team, and they were doing a great job. Yeah. And this is not a diversity and inclusion story that I'm sharing here. This is me learning one of the most important and useful lessons in my life. Challenging the status quo. It's not about trying to move mountains. It's just about trying to move the needle relentlessly. In the long terms, it makes a huge difference, and it also makes you grow. So, is progress outdated? I mean, progress as we knew it has led us where we are today. You know, Eloïc talked about it. Climate disruption, geopolitical instability, war, inequality, food insecurity. And still, progress needs to be right at the top of the agenda, and especially right at the top of your agenda. Because business leaders have a critical role to play here. I'll tell you a bit more about my experience. Our group was created in 1966 by my father. Over the first 50 years, we consistently had very solid growth. For decades, Sodexo kept developing and conquering new markets, and I wasn't raised to head up the group. My father had always told my two sisters, my brother, and myself that we should not mistake organization charts for family trees. And then one day, he brought us together and told us that he wanted one of us to succeed him. I became chairwoman of Sodexo in 2016. In 2020, after 54 years of uninterrupted growth, COVID hit. We had had challenges before, but I think COVID turned out to be the most brutal crisis in our entire company history. Overnight, many of our clients stopped their activities. Just like that, we lost a third of our revenue. I don't know what your experience of lockdown was, but for me, like for many, it meant being in my flat in Paris for weeks. It also meant thinking about the fate of Sodexo, about our teams still working on the ground, you know, in hospitals, senior homes, some corporations that were not closed, about my family, of course. My father got COVID, you know, the first week of the lockdown, and then the following week, my mother. And about also my personal responsibility. I had no options other than looking at this crisis as an opportunity for us to progress. And I became absolutely convinced that progress today is not about doing more, it's about doing better. For us, it's about taking care of all our stakeholders, leaving no one behind. It's about redefining what performance means, beyond financials. It's about strengthening our social contribution even more through social innovation. And it's also about taking planetary boundaries into account and doing something about it. Over the past 2 years, we progressed on that journey and we reinvented ourselves. After decades of conquest, we decided to grow more selectively and qualitatively, and we are working on our commitment to an ambitious target to achieve net zero emissions by 2040. This is the first in our industry. It's a very profound transformation for us. For example, by 2030, in our menus, we want a third of all options to be vegetarian and 70% of main dishes to be low carbon. It means converting all those we serve to sustainable food that's good for the planet and good for you. And about sustainable food, you know, I just got back from India, and in India, already 90% of the food, you know, is vegetarian. So, congratulations to India. And I can tell you, the food is excellent. So we need good food, and simply good, because pleasure is all central here. It also means reviewing our entire value chain, and it's staggering. And it means also continuing to invest heavily in our managers, as we have done over the past 2 years with our empathetic leadership program. The goal is to help them progress on soft skills, on how to recognize their teams, share feedback, and navigate a very complex environment. Because today, everyone is questioning their attitudes toward work, especially in our service sector, and I'm sure you've heard about the Great Resignation. And we need inspiring leaders in order to retain our talent. What is amazing about progress is that it starts with each and every one of us. Today, I wish you to keep your growth mindset and continue on your path of progress. It doesn't stop at the gate of HEC. Never be paralyzed by the search for perfection. By nature, it is out of reach. Progress, on the contrary, is accessible to all, no matter the issue you're dealing with and no matter where you start from. Don't be afraid to fail. Mistakes are part of everyone's growth path. Surround yourself with people who are better than you in what they do. Ask to be challenged so you don't get stuck in misconception. Environmental activists challenges us hard, for instance. It's not comfortable, but they make us continue to progress. Be bold. After all, your school motto is learn to dare. And more than ever before, we need bold, optimistic business leaders who believe that we can continue to progress towards a better, more sustainable, and desirable world. Let us be the best possible ancestors for the generation that are yet to come. Thank you very much, and good luck on your journey.